agree on here is you want the ability to influence people. You want the ability to persuade them, to be able to move them to some degree in your direction, to get them interested in your ideas, and to be honest with yourself that this is something that you want. The second thing you have to be aware of is that you're usually going at it from the wrong end. You're thinking first and foremost about yourself. This is the number one problem that afflicts humanity in the world today. We are all becoming so much more self-absorbed and so much more narcissistic. And a lot of it is understandable. We're spending so much time on our smartphones and our virtual worlds and not enough with other people and interacting with them and getting inside their spirit and their mentality. You're not going to be effective in your actions in the world if it doesn't come from within. If there isn't some kind of inner spirit guiding you, if it's just something you read in a book by Ryan Holiday or Robert Greene and you're applying it, but it doesn't have something in your heart or in your spirit, you're going to botch it. It's not going to be real. It's not going to be effective. I would read law number 7 in my book about confirming people's self-opinion. If this person has a low self-opinion of himself or herself, going there and saying, "Oh, friends, you're so great, you're so wonderful, don't worry, things will be better," you're working against their self-opinion. They're going to listen, they're going to go, "Oh, yeah, right," and they'll forget you because they don't think of themselves that way. You have to know how they think of themselves before you craft the right kind of response. What is it that will get to them? Some people want to just complain. They just want to have somebody who hears them, who listens and doesn't give them advice. And by listening to them and just letting them spill their guts out to you, you are actually helping them in a deep way. And maybe you can have the opportunity to give little pieces of advice. But don't fall for the fallacy trying to re-engineer their life or give them big advice is going to somehow suddenly make you their savior. You have to work within their framework, within their worldview, in order to have any kind of lasting change.
I say we have a lower self and a higher self. You can recognize this. Your lower self comes out when you eat junk food, when you spend 2 days just playing video games all day, when you don't get your work done, when you're lazy, when you're not nice to people. You feel kind of bad. You feel kind of ugly and rotten. You may not admit it to yourself, but something doesn't feel good about it. But when you have discipline, when you spend 3 months getting in really good shape and you get better habits, when you complete a project, when you work well with other people and get something done, you're tapping into that higher potential that each human being, every single human being has.
According to Keats, the Shakespeares of the world, the highly creative types, cultivate what he calls negative capability. They can negate the ego and its anxieties. They are not in a rush to come to a conclusion about the world or any new phenomenon. They are completely open to entertaining this idea or that idea at the same time while continuing to observe what's going on around them. They can look at ambiguous or contradictory evidence and not be disturbed or feel the need to explain them away. This ability to withstand what seems mysterious, to manage the lack of knowing something with certainty, is the primary quality of all creative people, no matter their profession. Obviously, men and women are different. Men tend to be seduced by visuals, the way a woman looks, is sort of the primal way of seducing a man. Women are very prone to words, to the verbal aspect. And seducers, the typical Don Juan of the 17th century, they discovered that through language, through poetry, through casting a spell on a woman with their words, that this was the weakness that they had. And so many of these great early seducers were just great talkers. If you look at like some of the great ones in the 16th, 17th century, they were not handsome men. They were actually, one of them was physically repulsive, but had such an incredible way with words that he could seduce almost any woman.
The worst situation is to feel like you're miserable, you're unhappy, you feel blocked in what you're doing, but you don't have the requisite energy to change yourself. You try different things, but you're half-assed about it. You consider changing your career. You maybe start thinking about some new skills, but you're not emotionally, deeply engaged in what you're trying to change. You have to tell yourself, time is of the essence. You have less of it than you think. You could die tomorrow. It's not going to come easily. So you have to be energized and motivated and excited to actually make the change. It's your level of degree of want and energy that will get you out of your rut. And sometimes you have to feel desperate and urgent in order to really get the requisite energy.
You have to be able to be open to what's happening in the present moment, with people, with events, but because of fear, you're slipping further and further behind. You're locked in the past. You think that ideas that you had are exactly what's happening. You're not paying attention to the things that are around you, because paying attention is hard and it's difficult, and it means letting go of some of your most cherished ideas about the world and just being open to experience. What I want to train you, the reader, to look at is to not look at what they say or their appearance, but to look at their actions and the patterns of their behavior. So for instance, I talk about Howard Hughes in chapter 4 as somebody who's got a very weak character, who was a horrific businessman, and people were lured in by his image of this sort of maverick aviator, kind of, great Hollywood person, etc. But if you looked at the patterns of his behavior, you would have seen that he was actually quite toxic. So stop looking at what people say about themselves and look at their actions.